Okay, so what I say, thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit about the current state of OMR and what I see from our experience of what we are moving. No? So in this talk, invite you to think not from the perspective of the OMR problem itself only, but about the service it can provide. Our experience is that in the last year, we have improved a lot of results. In most cases, it has been due to the fact that we have more data to train the machine learning system. But there is a very big component that has to do with the experience we have acquired in order to be able to correctly tackle the problems. Most of the community research is based on studying how to retrieve the most accurate digital score from an input image, but is that what society needs? In human translation technologies, the purpose is a very important in defining the task. It is totally different to translate the subtitles of a movie than the one from a medical report. You don't use exactly the same techniques. This may seem obvious, but we cannot approach the same way an OMR used to obtain data for MIR tasks, such as share music using query by Hamming, than reading music to obtain a translation of a mensural work into modern notation. I have called it, for saying anything, OMR prime, no? To say that's another thing. In the first case, the most important is that the output of the OMR is accurate as the source as possible. In the latter, that the user effort should guide all the process. This is equivalent to automate office tasks that without the help of the technologies would need a large number of people to be performed. If we take the OMR task as a means to encode music, in this plot we have represented which approach we could use depending on the human effort required to obtain the encoding in relationship with the encoding fidelity. That is, how accurately the encoding represents the score in the image. I have drawn in blue systems to encode modern notation, and in red the ones to encode mensural ones. To manually encode music, we could use any of these systems, Finalis, Sibelius, MuseScore, Dorico, doing WYSIWYG. Or we could use any of the encodings, to do it with language, musical language systems, either Code or MEI, for example. We could use Barrier 100 Middleware, for example, to get a feedback what you are doing, or systems like CMME to do it, for example, WYSIWYG, no? But we could use any automatic system. We don't need, we just need, for example, to extract information for doing later research. We could use OMR without any kind of post-edit. It will be very, very fast, but with uncertain quality. For example, this could be an output, with, as you can see, with many errors. It could be better or even better, no? But it depends on the model, the number of data, with training data, etc. But if we need high quality data, for example, this output has been manually corrected by a person, by the musicologist, I would name it OMR with post edition. No? So if we want to, for example, to catalog into rhythm or any kind of accurate musicology study, we need a high precision encoding, any of these ones. If, for example, we need to search a kind of glyph, for example, or search a melody, or check the copies or derivative from other work, we could use any of these other methods. So if we can sacrifice the precision in the search, we could use an unprocessed OMR output. So, depending on the use of the encoding, one must balance what's the most convenient way. If building OMR system for end users, we should take into account not only the OMR itself, but also any user experience and usability techniques. That is, build the OMR systems and models that don't discard the final use of the system. And design everything taking into account the end user or user personas. Is that we must study which kind of people should use the system. It's not the same as, let's say, a classical musicologist that a person that devotes his time to research of music information retrieval. Well, thanks to the efforts of this community, the music reading community, among others, OMR technologies have seen a dramatic improvement in the recent years. We are getting very good results with very difficult sources in the past years. And for example, in this case, doing manually, it took around 1 hour to encode, and do it with automatic system, it took almost 4 minutes to obtain the data from a page. This score, although doesn't seem very difficult, is well, you can see it right with Photoscore. It leads to very bad results. The errors are painted in red. But in last researches, we are getting very surprising results, such as this full page end-to-end recognition with much less errors than commercial systems. The community is not addressing only common Western notation, and as you will see in a presentation later, this has been the best paper in last ISMIR that was awarded to this work about OMR on GeoGambo notation, a Korean one. The reason that the jury gave was that it took into account several disciplines: musicology, pattern recognition, music information retrieval tasks, and so on. In short, the OMR has made a quantum leap in the recent years. However, we still find this kind of outputs that I presented 2 or 3 years ago here in WoRMS. No? The music figures are just quarters without stems, with some text and two small lines, and the stub lines are not that bad, but no current system is able to retrieve a correct output. Audiveris retrieves that, Capella scan this garbage, and Forte this one, Photoscore that, Smart Score this output, Muret trained with the camera Primus model this output, or PlayScore says that there is no music in this image. So, in this scenario, some projects have emerged, such as Repertorium, where OMR is crucial. So it needs much more precision on that. No, in this project, 400,000 images of plain chant has to be transcribed. These are the members of the team with some sources to transcribe plain chant notations such as this one and other ones. Or in the same project, up to 3,000 opera areas. These are the areas loaded into the system, and each word contains about 700 images. I don't know what has happened in this image, but well. Well, obviously, the term OMR that comes from OCR maybe is not the best one. In fact, the name of the workshop explicitly avoids this terminology and prefers music reading systems. In any case, given the context I've introduced, I want to focus on two sides of the OMR problem. First of all, in some of today's discussions, I think we will see no dimensions can be addressed in isolation. If I ask here to the layout analysis people, some or you may say that this is a corner case, but how special is it? Obviously, we feel more comfortable with normal cases, But my point here today is that if we just prepare everything only for the normal ones, we might not be able in the future to solve the rest. So we have to prepare everything to have models, to have systems that are able to model even the worst cases, um, because we may go to, let's say, a minimum, a local minimum, no, in our research. In the next, sometimes where examples, we are showing example on how the three dimensions, the OMR cannot be decoupled. Let's start by the optical one. Let's talk here about everything related to the image processing. If you look at this image, please have a look on that. If you look it twice, you look at the watermark at the top, you will see that, well, the watermark is correct and it gives a correct score. But if you look it very well, you will notice that it's totally rotated. Uh, and this is something very usual when we receive PDFs with lots of images or compiled images. When they get extracted, sometimes they get rotated in 90 degrees. But the worst case is this one, no? That it seems a correct score. Regarding image processing, well, once rotated, I have rotated that. When processing this image, we must know the musical information below because we have to find below the stains that is music there, no? Uh, and this happens also with the removal of the watermarks, library stamps, or registry numbers. So we must know the information we are dealing with. Coming again to the orientation, this is a page of the national, a manuscript from the National Library in Spain. The name of the work is A Brief Introduction to the Skill of Musician of Music in 3 books. But well, the skills of the musician is also to rotate because you can see that we have both orientations in the same page. This should not be a problem for us in the future. Well, talking about other thing that has to be dealt with the optical part is the noise that you will have focused found in many cases. This is a very usual sheet in bands in Spain. Coming when you're copying and copying and copying from the sources. If I highlight some of these parts, the noise can cause troubles to detect meaningful symbols, such as these dots you can see here or here or here. We must distinguish between dots or in blots. Maybe, regardless of geometric considerations, the staff line absence may be solved with musical knowledge. The same can be applied to this example. It could be a posterior handwritten annotation with a sharp, or it's just a printing defect. We need musical information to solve it. Well, continuing with the optical matter, in current end-to-end systems, we usually train with data augmentation, but we usually discard classical OMR preprocessing tasks. In this JASMUS project sample, the output lead no results to extract with this input image, but if you preprocesses, you get almost exact match from the output. So it's important that. This book belongs to the Cathedral of Orihuela collection, very close to here to Alicante. When we received that, we asked the people to do it again, but this cannot be done. So we have to deal with this kind of sources. Or these ones. In this case, we need to be able to distinguish where you have the names of the parts in the capital letters, or distinguish that the top right does not belong to this folio, but the other one. No. Well, I'm usually asked about the resolution of images. We usually answer that one thing is the preservation of the images, that they have to be stored in very high resolution, and other different one is the OMR, the information the OMR system need. Fortunately, I think that we are already far from those OMR systems that require high resolution TIFF black and white images. Without those, the OMR didn't work. But however, the resolution depends on the content, as you can see here. Now, both images have the same resolution, but the Aquitanian mnemonic notation at right cannot be read at all. There are many details that if we drop the resolution are lost. And regarding resolution, we need to think not only about what the OMR system, but the global impact of the weights of the images. No, in terms of implementation, one must find a trade-off between the content-dependent minimum resolution and the required resolution for the user to be able to read the score to correct later, higher than the machine, and importantly, the image processing times. These are plots of a comparison of several triple IF server operations. You can see that in some operations, the operation may degrade with some current concurrent users. Up to 25, there are not too many. To finish this section, I just wanted to show you an example I recently found on the use of artificial intelligent image reconstruction techniques that applied to music may be used to reconstruct the OMR itself before doing anything. No, this has been applied using a non-OMR model. Well, talking about the second part of the term OMR. Many OMR systems are not so much recognition or optical problems, but rather problems with the representation or the encoding itself. Let's begin with this section with a very easy case. If we want to retrieve to handle the output of this score staff by staff, well, when we have to deal with this stuff, you can see that well, any singer knows that the custos at the end of the previous line has information about which is the beginning of the next line. So well, this is easy to recognize, but the output should be consistent with that. Or let's take this case from the Fondo de Música Tradicional from Barcelona in Spain. Usually the economy to manual and write scores lead to this situation. You can see there is no clef or key signature or anything. If the model focuses this case, it can just make an assumption of the clef or the meter according to the duration of the figures, or the implied accidentals of note, as you can see here, no? But it depends on the harmony, the underlying harmony. However, just by feeding the system with previous information is very easy to solve everything. So the contextual music information is important for the system to work. Well, as I mentioned before, depending on the use of the OMR output, one must take into account or discard some aspects. Here, the internal model must understand music, but also allow for an unusual, unexpected situation because musicology may be interesting. In this case, it's just how the figures should be engraved according to the meter. Here we raise the question of the importance of the diplomatic recognition. This is a Celtic songbook. In case we are just in our model storing 8 notes, the output does not depend on the OMR, but on the engraver. So depending on the engraver, we will get one output of the other. So this is something we have to take into account. This is something similar. This comes from the Lilliput mailing list. In all cases, it's exactly the same input sequence, but note how they are different, very different rules for engraving, the same in usual notation applications. This is what we cannot rely everything on the engravers later. Models cannot condition what it has to be recognized, neither engravers. As an example, I will focus on some examples of bar lines. In this one, this is not unusual in transition notation. This is modern notation with some parts of mensural notation. Uh, I don't think that any current OMR can deal with it, but it's not a problem of the OMR itself, but the model it's using, this case or this case. In this case, for example, the staff group starts partway through the system as we switch from a solo to a choral part. Or see here the partial line at the bottom of the staff. Here the used musical model must understand this concept. If we focus on the coding rather than the internal music representation, here's an example of a two-measure repetition. This is very easy to be encoded in Humdrum, but very tricky to convert to MEI. So not only the recognition model must be prepared, we will end up saving and loading transcriptions. In some cases, there are models that directly are converting from the image to the final transcription in an end-to-end fashion. Well, in our case, besides when we find these cases, besides adding requests to the encoding formats to the GitHubs and so on, when we found an unsupported feature, we usually create extensions of the format to deal with it. This is what has happened to us, for example, with the signum congruentia to encode in MEI and Verovia. That's not very well supported. So we have added an extension of that to be able to work with that. Well, in this case, the bar lines are functioning as phrasing slurs, similar to the vertical lines in chant notation, and there is no implied metricness in these lines. MEI or Music XML have problems to work with it. Here, in this example, there is a key signature notated as two sharps and two naturals. This key signature is repeated in each line of the piece. I think it's interesting here is not that, well, we have to encode in any way the theory in our systems, the music theory, but being unusual, maybe a corner case, any person could understand it. So if we want the machine to recognize music, it should recognize these things. Something similar to this case is an impromptu by Xavier Monsalvache. See the clef changes at the beginning here. That's not a very usual scenario. And I want to finish this section by highlighting some elements that may seem unusual, but can be very frequent. This is a very frequent score. For example, hanging slurs that begin in one staff and continue in the next one, beams, dynamics, octave changes. Besides the crossing, the staff crossing and figure repetitions, or the creation and destruction of staves in systems. So it's not that unusual. So we at this point we cannot think that our systems can discard this input. So we have to be prepared for that. Or some scores on other idiomatic instruments like this percussion one. Okay. Well, and the third part of the acronym, the R, most of the papers in this workshop address the recognition issues, happily taking into account other aspects. As most of the models we are using are borrowed from the general pattern recognition discipline, we we'll just now give a point of some questions for reflection on their application into OMR. Well, this is a call for help for the community to work everyone on that. We can share goals, data, models, anything, but we need urgently to standardize shared metrics that depends not only on the OMR problem itself, but also on the each kind of OMR output we need. There are some papers, very good ones. Some of them have been published from people here. Uh, but I think it's more maybe one of the most important tasks the community has to tackle in the next months or years. Let me now to add to the user to the formula. Some of the current metrics are valid for comparing methods according to computational aspects, but maybe they are not aligned with the end use. If the end use is the transcription corrected by humans, the metric should be bound to the user effort. As an example, I will give you a previous experience by us. We used to recognize the mensural ligature using primitives. You see the ligature start, the brevis, plicas, and oblique symbols, and the ending of the ligature. Here, with this representation, we used to obtain very good symbol error rates. But when the user had to correct it, as the user had to correct 5 symbols each time, the correction was extremely painful, and the correction time, the final times dropped a lot, or raised a lot. Sorry. So, in order to do that, we sacrificed the very usual the detection of very usual figure is the brevis that worked very well, but built some specific symbols for ligature, increasing the alphabet. Here, the symbol error rate was worse, but the final user correction times dropped considerably. Now, I propose you to try to correct this. I give you some seconds, no? Um how long does it take to you to correct it? It depends on your mood, maybe. In the morning, you will be very strict at correcting things, but it takes to you, I don't know, 7 hours doing that. Finally, you will not find anything, but it will take some time. In this case, you can see here in the middle, I have not added an arrow, but there's one mistake in the whole piece in the middle that's with a square. So the correction times are nothing, almost nothing, but it takes more time to review manually everything than correct that. So what I post here is that the impact of this non-OMR task have a very big impact in the final times. No, so that with other specs such as the loading and processing times of the images have to be also considered in the whole scenario. We have found that these things that usually are ignored when designing the systems, in the end, have the greatest impact in the whole process. Other processes must be also included, such as the discarding non-musical contents, but well, taking care because sometimes, for example, the information included in the indexes is very important to organize the contents. So this has to be also considered. It will possible in the future to include in the OMR features to recognize colors. For example, it's now required in some early music notations. Following this line, I also wanted to recall that there are other kinds of music, such as some manuscripts like this, This this is from an action company of a Fleetwood Mac, the Fleetwood Mac task manuscript. We should be able to recognize the sheets. This is a real concert in Valencia. The pianist had this sheet. Well, this is a very low resolution, but you can imagine that for OMR it will be a kind of difficult thing, no? But suppose that, this is a very famous pianist, but suppose it will be important to get what's inside, no? So we have to be able to work on that. Moving a little bit, I'm sure that there are OCR recognizers for Persian text. So let's combine it with chord recognition. And this is Persian pop. And coming back to the common Western notation, any recognition task must have a profound knowledge of music. I don't say that it has to be encoded as rules, but models have to include it some way. By means of any technique, such as the attention mechanism or any other like foundational models or whatever. To finish, well, we can improve a lot, but we cannot work miracles. See how the figure is a collage of two other images. This is real, from one of our works that we were transcribed. So you can invent it. Well, we cannot work miracles, or maybe we can. This is a misa by Clemens non Papa that we had in our collections. I think it could be corrected by very good language models. But to end, do you think that a machine could read this? This is the Stockhausen helicopter string quartet. I think so, because there is musical information there that maybe the systems in the end could recognize with proper training. And it would be lovely to recognize this kind of manuscripts from the Renaissance, no? To make the book sing. But obviously, we will not be able to recognize that. And that's all. Thank you for listening to me. Before ending, I would like to thank our OMR team, all of them in Alicante. Check the QR code for the whole team for this exciting moment we are experiencing or researching on OMR. And thank you to all of you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. Thank you very much for this very nice presentation. I particularly love that that it really shows the variety of problems that live within, and I hope that we can actually transition now a little bit to a couple of questions, and I'm sure there are a couple of questions from the audience. So I would love people just like raise your hands virtually here. I think there is a reaction here that says raise hand. So if you have some questions, please raise your hand and then we can, or just unmute.
And
yeah.
if for some reason you cannot speak, you can write the question in the chat as well, and we can read it. Jerry.
Yeah.
Thank you for the speech. So basically, the takeaway I have from the keynote is that we have to focus on the end use case because it affects the metrics we use to evaluate the entire process. So my question is, I don't really know what the end tasks are from a musicologist perspective, because I have my own idea of like transcribing modern music so that I can play it on the piano or something like that, but it's not the same task that, let's say, you have. So I would be curious to have this explored somehow.
Yeah, finally, I always think of the OMR task as a encoding task. I want to finally you have to share the output given let's say the music XML, the kernel, or anything. So what I just say is that before tackling a new problem, it has to be very clearly defined what the end user will do with that. Uh, in cases, for example, like like how to train the data sets to train to build the models, at this point you already need to know what you have to retrieve later from that. So well, you say that you are transcribing piano for musicology, but musicology task is a very broad term that has to be clearly defined. In some cases, we are working with some musicologists that just need the intervals of the notes to later do searches. But sometimes it happens to them that they ask you to do that because they don't know that other things can be done as well. So I cannot give to you a receipt answer. Is that is the requirement analysis at the beginning of the work that has to define that.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Philippe?
Yeah. Thank you, David, for the presentation. So it's very interesting. So I'm representing a group which is rather new to the field of recognition, although we are working on MER for a long time. And we have a system that I'm going to present this afternoon. And one big issue, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, is evaluation and metrics. So we are really keen to know what the community thinks about that, and what are the tools available. We use music diff, but it's not really, I don't know if it's a yardstick for evaluating OMR. So my question is, what is the status of research on this aspect, and how can we evaluate the work and provide to the community metrics about what we do?
Okay, thank you. I know your work. Yes, let's see. I remember an Izmir. I don't know. I think it was in New York 8 years ago. So this question was on the table, and after the question, the output was just to measure how accurate was the detection of bar lines. Why is what? Because what people wanted was to evaluate OMR for score following systems. So this says to us that the metric depends on the use of the output OMR. So, for example, well, there are some words published. I think that let's see, Alexander has a paper on that extended a paper what Don Bert. And some people, or for example, I know that Antonio Reyes is working on that. But each of them are working on different aspect of the metrics. But I don't think there is any work that works explicitly on different approaches or orthogonal views of the metric evaluation depending on the use. What I think is that we have to borrow let's see, we have to borrow knowledge from user experience evaluation systems in case of if what you need is to correct the output of the OMR. If you just want to evaluate the output OMR to do searches, you can just go working with typical symbol error rates. So it will depend on the task you want to do later. But I don't think this is what I said, the source here, no? I think that the community has to work on that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can come back to the point when we present what we are doing. Thank you very much.
I think this might be one of the topics where we could think about breakout rooms. I mean, I'm just I can try to note it down if someone wants to specifically talk about this also later on directly. Feel free to, like, if anyone wants to kind of take over this topic, to just post it and we'll create a breakout room for this. I think it's a very interesting topic. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, it's a good idea to have a breakout room on evaluation, I think. With respect to the Don Bird paper on evaluation, it's a real pity that he couldn't be here to see all of the beautiful examples of like weird notation that he started collecting. My question is, who is going to take over this gallery of weird examples, because Don has unfortunately passed away recently.
Yes. Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, I have collected. I think I've been collecting weird examples for 5 years or so. That paper was an inspiration for me, and I just did that not a collection a collection let's see, activity for me, but just because I just wanted to be sure that our models were able to deal with these kind of things. So yes, maybe we can create some place to upload all these things. Yeah.
I know just from my personal experience that putting stuff on GitHub, and it actually can include images and stuff as well, is a really good way to preserve information for many years without maintenance costs, because if you host it on a university server or something, it tends to disappear. And everything that I've seen so far that was hosted on some university servers, latest after 10 years, it was unavailable. So I think this would be one thing. And there's the OLMA research community. Maybe this would be a place where, I mean, we already have the bibliography, there is the datasets repository. So I think this would also be maybe a good thing to move it there. I have actually another question myself, because it kind of relates to one of the two slides that you showed. One was if we talk about modern notation, and I think some of us are just interested in modern notation. You showed examples where you had something like a diff with the arrows marked being red. Can you just mention which tool you used for creating those diffs? Because I think they're really helpful for quickly visualizing the arrows.
The red ones. This was, sorry, this was done by Antonio Rios here. And I think he did it manually. But if you, no, but it's easy. If you want to do it with Verovio, it's very easy, because you have to add to the SVG CSS rules. I have done it in Muret, for example, to highlight. So I can tell to you, it's very easy. It's just to create the SVG path. Let's see, the X path to access the node. So it's quite easy to do.
Yeah, I have to add that we created a tool music diff, which now has been developed by Greg Chapman. It's a nice package on GitHub that you can use, and it produces exactly that. The differences at all levels between both core, you can visualize both at the same time.
And the second question I have, which could you give me the reference? There was one paper where you showed something like a image restoration thing, and I didn't catch which paper you were.
Sorry, can you repeat? I was reading the chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was one image. I think it was very close to that one as well, where there was an image restoration task where you had like a degraded image and then it recovered the thing. Which research was that?
No, it was something I was telling that I found that in the typical web page about showing the impact of AI to our lives. It's not a research paper.
Okay.
But what I saw is that in other totally different world from this one, they restored an image like the same as if you would do that with your aunts or your parents' photograph. They do with scores, and it leads me to think that sometimes we are losing these opportunities, and we are thinking just on the how to make our systems to work by them by alone.
Because I remember a student of mine was working on image restoration as well, and it did not work that well.
Yeah. It's just
As well.
I cannot tell you exactly, but it was just a point to think about.